Welcome back to another episode of KOTESOL Conversations. This one is on teacher health and happiness. We answer that question every day. How are you today? Most of us don't really think about it. It's just, I'm fine. How about you? But today I really want to think about it. I've invited two people who have given talks on this topic. They've written some very interesting stuff on teacher health and happiness. For example, Rhea, she has given talks on teacher health. She's always posting it in my social media feed, lots of great stuff about staying healthy. That's really interesting. And Jared, I read a great article in KOTESOL Voices, not just about physical health, but also mental health, how important that is. It's something that can be an issue for all of us. And I've also seen Jared give some great talks as well. So I'll start with you, Rhea. What kind of challenges have you faced in your career, your teaching career, health-wise?
So I was thinking about this question, and Wayne gave us the questions before the interview, and I thought, oh, I've been very lucky. But then I remembered, wait a minute, oh, I remember that thing. Oh, I remember that thing. When we live overseas, it's the same as living anywhere. We can be surprised by all kinds of experiences that come out of the blue. And I think that they will often be more intense because we don't have the resources that we're used to, perhaps if we are fresh off the boat. But even if we have been here for a while, it can make you realize that you don't necessarily have the same systems of support as before, or sometimes you have better systems. So yeah, I thought about it, and I tend to be a bit of a risk taker in my life looking back, and I go for extreme sports, and I like to go into challenging situations and put myself out there. And sometimes they just find me. So I could probably share a bit of a long list of things. I kind of have 9 lives, more or less. One of the first ones that came to mind was way back in 2003, and I'd been in Korea for just a year. And I used to wear contact lenses, and I kept getting these dreadful eye infections. Like, they were quite gross. Like, my eye was getting all cloudy and I was uncomfortable, and I would go to the doctor and he gave me some drops and they go away. And then it would happen again, and then it happened again. So it's quite scary to mess with your eye health, right? And he just said, you know what, you can't wear contacts anymore. I was slightly devastated because, it just seemed really uncomfortable to deal with having to wear glasses if you're playing sports or just living your life and traveling. So I considered doing LASIK surgery at that time. And this was when it wasn't quite as common. And I remember doing an internet search like, are you a good fit for this? Number one, are you a risk taker? And I was like, now it just seems like no big deal. But I thought, okay, can I trust a Korean doctor? Will there be a language problem and everything? But it worked out really well. And since that time, my eye health has been really great. I've also, like, in between living here and like traveling around while I live here, I've been hit by a car. I had a severe surfing accident, required a lot of stitches. I've broken stuff. Before the COVID thing came along, I got some kind of freak virus that was in the same family as COVID, and I had a degree, like 42 degrees Celsius fever for a couple days, but it just went away, and then and there's that. But I do think that also, it's challenging to live here emotionally without our support system. So I think that it's really interesting to have this talk, and how do we sustain our well-being as a person in all aspects, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, socially, is an interesting question.
Lots of interesting stuff there, Rhea. You mentioned risk-taking. Usually people tend to think of risk-taking as something adventurous, something positive, go out, chase your dreams. But perhaps in terms of health, you could also face some consequences. And you mentioned Korean medicine. Yeah, it can be quite scary going into a new country, a new medical system, not knowing how it works. My experience most of the time has been very positive, although one thing I've noticed is compared to England, where I grew up, privacy over medical conditions isn't quite there. So, for example, oftentimes I've gone in to see a doctor and the door is left wide open. You're telling the doctor your medical issue, and it feels like they're sharing it with the whole lobby. Whereas in England, it always felt very private. Close the door, keep this private. We won't share any medical information with anyone. So I've noticed that. How about Jared? What kind of challenges have you faced in terms of health in your teaching career?
If I go back about 12 years when I first started teaching, I remember there was a certain level of like crippling anxiety that I had before beginning a class. And I'm sure that many teachers have had the experience of just being very nervous and sort of not really knowing what they're doing and a lot of that became almost clinical for a while because I was just struggling with that anxiety that I had. And it was sometimes hard to get through a class with having sort of almost nervous, like sort of sometimes fits at times. And sort of there was a certain level of that. And I was taking medication at the time. And also I went to therapy about that as well. But I also had a good support group of different people that were able to help me through that time, to get me through that time. And as I started to gain momentum and confidence, I recall feeling better about my teaching. I feel like as I got through that, I started to, tell myself, give myself like self talk that was positive self-talk, encouragement, and I started to really just like, as I got more confident, I started to gain more assertiveness during that time. And I think a lot of that really helped me to overcome that anxiety and certain level of anxiousness that I had when I was in front of the classroom. If I fast forward to living in Korea, I'm sure, as Rhea said, there's just a lot of various challenges that you have as you are living in Korea. Certainly, there was some of the similar kind of anxiety that was there in terms of just not really knowing how to speak the language, feeling like kind of inadequate in that area, as well as how to deal with certain students and on a linguistic level, I guess. And so there was that level of sort of not really knowing what to do about that. So I think that I was still sort of dealing with that consciously over time. So I think that there was a sense of needing to overcome that anxiety, I guess. And certainly through talking with people, I feel like that was something I was able to do, and I was able to learn from different people by just like how they deal with those issues, and I feel like that really helped me as well.
You mentioned anxiety there. So by the end of your journey in Korea, once you had finished most of your classes, you would go into the classroom not feeling any anxiety at all. Was it like you've got enough experience now, you didn't really get nervous?
Yeah, I think so. I think over time, it's like as I got into the material, as I mastered the material that I was supposed to teach, I feel like I had a sense of confidence with that. And also, as I got to know students personally, as I started to have a personal connection with students and started to not focus as much on my preparation of material as it was actually connecting with students, I feel like I was able to also gradually get away from that anxiety regarding maybe and a certain level of like almost imposter syndrome that I had in terms of not really knowing what I was talking about, as well as trying to articulate what I was, what I had to study in order to be there. So I think a lot of that was also coming into play as well.
Yeah, I think similar experience to me because I started in the Hogwarts system and I started in quite a tough school where there were CCTV cameras, a strict director. I had no experience teaching children, and one class in particular was very difficult in terms of classroom management. And every time the school bell would ring, it was like, oh no, I was so nervous, so worried about going into the class. It felt like an existential crisis. Like, will I survive this next 50 minutes? Can I make it out of the classroom? And I think that stayed with me for quite a while, even when I eventually started teaching university students, maybe 18 months later. Still, I would go in a little bit nervous because I'd had this experience with CCTV cameras, a strict director. I even got, a warning letter for being a boring teacher when I was in the Hogwarts. So I think it took a few years for me to actually enter every class and feel like it's under control, I'm relaxed, I'm calm. And I think even now, sometimes I'll go into a class if I'm doing something new or if it's the first class of the semester. Sometimes I worry about, will the classroom equipment work? Is the computer ready? So I always go into the classroom like 15 minutes early, 20 minutes early, make sure everything is set up. And then it's like, now I'm relaxed. I don't have to worry, everything is ready. Rhea, I saw you gave a presentation a few years ago, I think it was in Daegu, at a whole conference dedicated to teacher well-being. It was called the Inner Thrive. It was one of my favorite conferences. I think it was the last face-to-face conference I went to before the pandemic. And you gave an interesting workshop on 7 pillars of health. What were those 7 pillars? Could you share them with us today?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I thought about that conference, and I believe that the three of us connected in that space as well. And here we are again.
Actually, Rhea, I was watching a video clip of your workshop 2 days ago, and there are only 2 people in the shot. One is you in front presenting, and the other person in the front row is Jared. So I thought that was perfect that we're kind of reunited here today on this topic.
It is. And I know since that day, like personally, I've had a lot of discussions with both of you individually because we discovered how passionate we are for this topic of well-being and how important it is. And it's actually the field that I was more focused on before coming into education, but I find that they're inextricably linked, and that teaching is such a vital act to the community, and teachers are often not valued enough. Teachers should make more than doctors, my personal opinion. um, but also that it requires an incredible amount of emotional presence and strength, and we can underestimate how much we need to do to keep ourselves going and present and nourished in that way. So when I was invited to think of a topic to present at that particular event, I discovered the concept of the 7 pillars of health, which spoke to me because maybe you've heard of the 3 pillars of health. Can anyone mention them off the top of your head? No?
Well, I don't want to cheat because I did see the video clip a couple of days ago, so I don't want to look like the A+ student ready to pass the exam.
It's a build on from the 3 basic ones, which are sleep, food, and exercise. But they were reframed in this article that I found more on sleep being not just sleep, but the quality of your sleep, looking into what happens with REM and different delta waves, and when you sleep and how to like nourish your sleep routine. So it went into things in a lot more detail for each one. It also, I've got a note here. All right. So I was really interested in this because I feel like it follows a lot of Eastern medical practices of like a very full body system. Um, and when we look at what is going on with ourselves, it is in a way that we're very multidimensional and we're very complex. And we have to kind of spend time investigating, not just from a solving a problem after a problem happens point of view, but to keep sustaining our systems and our immunity and our well-being all the time. And that it can be a joy to do that, but it's also sometimes very hard. We come up against health issues suddenly and seemingly unknowingly. So it looks at our emotional and mental well-being, which, we all have a strong mind-body connection. If, like Jared said, anxiety can affect us physically, there's really no separation to me between our physical and emotional selves and how important they both are. And also connection being whatever it is for you. Maybe it's more social, or maybe it's like a spiritual divine connection. Everyone needs that kind of nourishment as well. And little things like water. Sometimes just the simple act of, you know what, I'm not drinking enough water. And then you go ahead and you start to focus on that, tweaking one aspect of your well-being. And it takes you in a journey of focusing on yourself, which as teachers, it can just be that small adjustment of looking inwards and nourishing our own system of who we are in order to give, because teaching is a very giving profession. I don't think that there's ever a day that we don't have a little bit of wondering in the back of our mind, like what's going to happen in class today, or performance anxiety, or any other element, because it's kind of like getting up on a stage in a sense, or a stage that we've created with other players involved. I kind of just, yeah. So the 7 pillars of health. And in that workshop, it's more of a workshop. I take people through in kind of a guided meditation to focus on each one by one with a lot more intricacy, and allow the person to look at where they are in the system and see where they think that some more attention is needed. One of the other aspects of that workshop was that it can be overwhelming to think about your health and, oh, I have to be doing this, I have to be doing this, I have to be doing this. And teachers tend to think that way. And to be comforted in that maybe just one small adjustment is all you really need, and that you can always come to this picture of it's like a reflective practice for well-being, more or less, and just make a few small adjustments. And sometimes it's also the act of sharing this together with someone else that is helpful.
That's right. I remember in the video clip I saw, and maybe the memory as well, connection is really important. I think that's something we all forget when we think health. Maybe it's like diet, exercise, breathing techniques. I remember that as well. But connection, how much connection do we need to be healthy or be happy? Does it differ based on your personality? Does some people need more connection, or people less connection? Like, how much connection do we need, Rhea?
That's a really funny question, Wayne. I guess it's different for everyone. And maybe some people are more introverted or more extroverted, and maybe some people feel nourished through activities. I think we're all quite unique, and it's good to respect that we can never quite, everyone's very mysterious. We don't really know what their focus is or what it is that will nourish that particular person. But there are many kind of approaches, and it's a very multi-leveled approach that I like. For me, sometimes it could just be getting back to getting some exercise in the day, and that kind of irons out everything else. Or maybe just having a good talk with a friend, and then you come back to things and you get a new perspective from where you were at before.
Yeah, I used to play a video game called The Sims. I don't know if you're familiar, and there's these little bars on there about you're trying to keep your sim happy, so you need to make they're not hungry, they've got enough socializing time. And I think perhaps it's different for everybody, but we need to keep those bars full as much as we can. We need to be proactive about that. That's why I really like the 7 pillars. Jared, you also mentioned in your KOTESOL Voices article about being proactive. Health is not something you should just forget about, push it to one side and maybe just jump into your work. How can we be proactive about our health, Jared? Is it similar to what Rhea's been saying, or are there more things we can do?
Definitely. I would say that, yeah, I learned so much from Rhea's talk so a couple years ago, and it was really very helpful to think about health as being sort of a holistic kind of thing that we're dealing with. I think there's a sense that we have to see it as in a holistic way, and I think teachers should also seek to do that in terms of all the components to that, including sleep and exercise and diet. All of those aspects are very important. I would say for me personally, I think that sleep has been a very important thing for me to work on, how to get quality sleep, how to wind down at the very end of the day, try to make that space for sleep very, kind of sacred. And there's a sense of, preparing for bed, how that's really important every night in order to create a space that's going to be ideal for sleep. I think that's been one of the things that I think is important. And definitely diet is very important. I mean, I think what we put into our mouths every day, how we nourish ourselves, that's really a crucial aspect of our health. And certainly that's a very important aspect of a lot of things, including maintaining our weight, including just also feeling good, having certain feelings that we can feel every day because we're eating well, we're eating sensibly. And then also exercise. I mean, getting enough exercise has also been important for me in my current wellness routine. Is like how I can take lots of walks, go swimming, spend time doing the things that I like to do. And that's something that's very individual to every person has their own exercise that they really enjoy. So I think finding something that they like to do is really important. So yeah, I think the holistic package is really important.
Yeah, all good points. Sleep, I think, is something I see neglected every day. I have a LinkedIn account and I see many social media posts about this successful person sleeps 4 hours, this person wakes up at 6 a.m. and does 1,000 push-ups and then goes to be a CEO of some famous company. But for me, if I don't get enough sleep, I think in my experience, probably the worst classes I've taught or my worst experiences in the classroom have come when I've only slept a few hours the night before. And now I absolutely prioritize it. Always make sure I get at least 7 or 8 hours. For me, it's 8 hours, might be different for other people, but sleep is absolutely fundamental, I think, for teacher health. One problem I've run into in my career as well is burnout. Sometimes as teachers we have a lot of work to do. Could be grading. I've got midterm exams coming up next week and I still have to design them actually, and then there'll be all the grading afterwards, and then perhaps you're teaching a lot of classes. Burnout can creep up on you, you're not expecting it, and there's all the stress involved. Rhea, what can we do about burnout? Is there a way to avoid it? Is there a way to treat it? What's the solution for teacher burnout?
That's a great question. And as you were both talking, I was thinking about how, since the last time we discussed this together, the pandemic has happened. Definitely challenging everyone on all levels and fraying any systems that have weakness whatsoever, but allowing us a platform to experiment and to challenge our views. And I think only the values that we hold dear have remained up to this point in many aspects. And recently, one of my friends who's teaching in the States told me that like up to half the teachers in the public education are ready to quit because it's just been so tough through the pandemic, all the challenges they faced. And I'm sure that in every place that teachers are working, they've gone up against worrying about themselves and their families, or having the challenge of learning a lot of new technology, or spending so much time in technology, wondering how to balance feeling like a human with that. So there's no doubt that teacher burnout is on the rise all across the board in the education profession. Um, do you want to keep doing this work is a question a lot of people are probably thinking, like. And so um, I don't know if I have the answer for you, to be honest, but
So you,
I think
like you mentioned, continue the work. Do you mean continue teaching itself, or continue your specific job right now, or just like that day's work, like I'll do it tomorrow?
all of those things for sure. Like people are leaving the field, people are changing their job, or people are changing the way that they teach. I don't really know anyone who hasn't changed since 2019, quite a lot in some aspect. For myself, I found that I was ready to make some changes, smaller changes in my life, like changing my job, just to have something fresh and new after a period of teaching online, which I still am, but teaching online in the same kind of manner. Um, I think that to me, the most important connection is probably our emotional connection, but we can help ourselves in so many small ways. Like thinking about our meeting, I thought, okay, well, I just you have to spend some time focusing on how you feel, starting with your own feelings. And this might be just a small example, but I noticed, oh, the way that I'm sitting in my chair is creating some pain in my leg. And I didn't notice that till I let myself spend some time doing a bit of yoga. And I was like, how come it's like this? And then it made me think about where my computer was and how my chair was and what's my routine in between classes. So, I mean, it's a small mundane thing, but that really helped with my mood by the end of the day. And all these little adjustments from these different angles can be really helpful. But it's the people that make it worth it. The people in your life, the people that you can speak to and spend time with. I think most teachers are people. I mean, people are our world. We're here to work on helping navigate um, people who want to grow or are forced to grow through a system that they're in, the education system. I don't have the answer for you, Wayne, but I think that looking for the answers is the first step.
Yeah, I think
Different
there's
for each person.
I think there's a few things you mentioned there. Maybe going back to connection, like having good coworkers around you or people who you can talk to if you are burnt out or having a stressful day. So, yeah, in most offices I've worked in a number of different offices. I've enjoyed going into and having conversations. One thing I really enjoy about my current job is just going for lunch with a coworker, especially Wednesday, Fridays. I have a 2-hour lunch break between classes. And I don't do anything in that time. I don't do any grading. I don't do any lesson preparation. I've said that 2 hours is a break. I use all of it, go out, get something to eat, get some coffee, and makes me happy, makes me content, gives me energy. Yeah, so we need those breaks. Don't forget the small things. Sometimes we think, well, what is the solution to burnout? It's something huge, perhaps giving up teaching altogether. But it could be that just those little things you really build up could make a huge difference in the end. Jared, have you had much experience with teacher burnout? Have you found any strategies for dealing with teacher burnout?
I would definitely say that I do agree with everything that you two have said about just like how building in rest especially is important. To find the time to rest from teaching is it's a crucial aspect of how we can avoid burnout. And I think that's one thing that I neglected to do for a while, especially even when I was in Korea and I was working at an alternative school. I just noticed that I put a lot of responsibilities and tasks on myself, and there's this tendency to do that, I think, in that kind of school where there's a lot expected of you, and teachers are expected to, take on more and more and more things. And I think that I was really honestly spread very thin at that point, and that was very hard for me. And I knew that it was just getting so much, and I just had so many things that I had to do, and I felt burdened by that. And I think a lot of teachers are feeling burdened by their job, and especially during the pandemic we've all seen like how just extra responsibilities that we've had to take on, including, as Rhea mentioned, learning new technology. That's been a very important part of this period of time. And for me, I just think that through taking more breaks, that's helped me. I think when I switched jobs in 2019, I switched from that alternative school to a university job. So that also helped in terms of balancing my life, because I really wanted to have a proper work-life balance. And I think that was something that was the real motivation for me to move on to that job. And so I think that really helped a lot in terms of, I think a lot of people see job hopping or switching jobs as an important part of that in terms of getting there, because sometimes we need to leave the place that we are working at, especially if it's becoming too much for us. So I think there's a sense of needing to do that. And I think that also we have to learn about our own personal limits of what we can take on. What are the things that we personally can do, and what are some things that we cannot do, that we need to, perhaps give to other people, other responsibilities, delegate other responsibilities to other people, Or how can we, yeah, I guess really realizing that we're not superhuman, that we need to have our own rest and space, and we need to, be able to have that time of Sabbath, I guess you could say, like a Sabbath rest where we have that time away from our jobs, and something that we can do where we can pursue our own activities, pursue our own hobbies and interests. And I think that's something that's very healthy to have as well.
That's interesting. Yeah, having pursuits outside of teaching, so it's not your whole focus all the time is on your classes and your work. And I like that you mentioned sometimes when you identify the root of your burnout or the root of your issues, if it is the entire job itself and there's nothing you can really do about it, maybe the schedule is not going to change, or your co-workers are difficult, or the management's difficult, then you can reach that stage and say, hey, I'm going to dust off the resume, I'm going to start looking for jobs online, I'm going to make a change to my situation. But my advice is usually identify what the issues are. Do you have control over them? If you do have control, then use it, try to change something. And if you don't have the control and it is an issue, change jobs. That would be what I recommended. Going back to what you said, Rhea, you mentioned the pandemic has been an issue for a lot of teachers. How were you in the pandemic, Rhea? How was your health? Did the pandemic affect your physical health, your mental health? How was your whole experience? Because I assume now, Rhea, you're either going back into the classroom or soon you'll be going back into face-to-face teaching. How has the pandemic been for you as a teacher?
Well, personally, I was using a lot of technology before the pandemic came along, so in some aspects, I was quite gleeful that people are forced to be on board with doing things a certain way, and so online teaching was fun for me. But at the same time, I will look forward to going back to the classroom, which I think for me will probably happen in the fall. But up till now, it's been 2.5 years of teaching online exclusively. And I just, like you were talking about, focus on what I can do outside of the class time um, to keep my health going. And something that Jared said earlier in our conversation really struck me, that I think has been a light that's turned on for a lot of people. The word being empathy in the education world, and that is for our students, for ourselves. When you're teaching online, you have to cut back, you have to manage your expectations. And like Jared said, there was that moment when he thought, do I have to do all these tasks, or do I have to connect with my students? And teachers can attract perfectionist personalities who have a sense of responsibility and wanting to care for everyone and to do it really well. But we also have to recognize that we're limited. And we're limited, but also what we give is going to be enough. It's just going to be enough. We have to trust ourselves. So I think learning to trust what we're doing is a bit of a gift that comes through this process that the pandemic has forced us into. Um, my health, I think I've experimented with different kinds of ways to manage my health through the pandemic.
One more question, Rhea, something I've been wondering. Do you get the same satisfaction from your teaching when it's online in a Zoom class that you would in a face-to-face class? Is the energy different? Is your happiness different? Or is it pretty much like for like?
I think I'm going to have to be back in the offline world to compare, but I think it's quite similar for me. I think I can focus on the aspects that are beneficial in each situation. And I think the ideal world would be, at least where I work, to have our classes go offline, but also some students like having the online option. So perhaps having one day a week when all my classes are going to be online for the students who would have to commute really far or have a tough schedule. And I think integrating the best of each would be ideal. And I would really love to meet my students face to face. And we get a different felt sense when we meet someone in real life. Absolutely. There's no denying that. So it'd be great to be able to find the best of both worlds. And I think for a lot of us, the people that we've been able to stay well connected with throughout the time are people that we have met face to face and we have spent time with and built a connection with pre-pandemic. But at the same time, maybe we met new people um, throughout this time. Like I know through professional development, I've connected with teachers from far corners of the earth that I probably never would have known about. So I always feel really grateful that I got to know about their ideas and their pedagogy and anything new I could pick up.
Yeah, there's been a lot of benefits for online teaching, remote teaching, but something I've noticed going back to face-to-face classes the last few weeks, teaching face-to-face 4 days a week now, for me the energy is different. So in Zoom, well-managed classes, and I can get all my students speaking in pairs and groups, but I don't know what it is, but just being in a physical room with your students when they're talking to each other, and I play some kind of cafe music in the background where they're speaking. For me, the energy is much more, even though I have to commute, it takes me 1 hour, 15 minutes to get there, I have to wake up earlier, things like that. I don't know what it is, but when I finish those classes in a physical classroom, I always feel like I have so much more energy. Sometimes I would finish my Zoom classes, and even though I haven't gone anywhere and I've just stayed in my room teaching online, I always felt a lot more tired. So I wonder if that's a common experience or perhaps just me. But yeah, I've really enjoyed going back into, I don't want to say post-pandemic because the pandemic is still here. It feels almost post-pandemic in Korea, but I've really enjoyed going back to face-to-face teaching. How about Jared? How was the pandemic for you as a teacher?
Yeah, I think as a teacher, it's been an interesting kind of transition out of face-to-face into online. I'm still teaching online now. And I would say that it has been, yeah, I think that I've really kind of embraced it because I feel it's been really fun for me personally. I've really been glad to get to learn a lot about this. I think that as a teacher, I felt like even after a year at my university, I needed to have some space to grow and to challenge myself. And I really wanted to go in a different direction. And I think that, and I was actually kind of bored of the material that I was doing with my students. And so I was kind of wanting to have some kind of challenge. And I think that I really embraced the challenge of working online, of teaching online. And I think that was really good for me to have that. And so I think that it's been fairly smooth overall. It took some getting adjusted to. It was not completely natural, I think, but as I went through it, I felt that I enjoyed it. I started to really enjoy it. I liked staying at home and getting to, work very independently on the tasks that I had, and I was able to manage my time pretty well overall. I think that at the same time, there is a need to get that delicate balance of work-life balance, especially if you're working from home and learning how to do that. I had to continue to do that. And so, I build in time to go on walks, build in time to exercise, I build time to do that. So I had to learn how to do that in addition to my task of preparing my lessons and of doing all of that. And so I think that it was pretty smooth overall, and I still enjoy it. I really enjoy teaching online and getting to use a lot of different technologies with students and sharing that with them, and even also teaching students how to use the technology. It's been very enriching as an experience, but at the same time, I do miss face-to-face teaching and learning. I feel like that's where I learned the best personally in terms of being a student. Which I'm going to be a student this fall, a PhD student. So it's really, I know that that's where I would definitely learn the best as a student. And I'm sure that a lot of students would agree with that, as a student, it's best to be in that kind of environment. But as a teacher, I feel like you could definitely enjoy both sides of it. There are certainly positives and there's certainly drawbacks to teaching online. But I would say it has been a positive experience, but I'm definitely looking forward to getting to go back to the classroom as a PhD student this fall. So I think that'll be great.
Uh, Jared, do you have a preference? Now you've done a lot of online teaching, face-to-face teaching. There are a lot of teachers now, who are doing online teaching full time. They have no intention of ever going back to a face-to-face classroom. Is that something you would have no problem with in terms of health, in terms of happiness, in terms of contentment as a teacher, or do you feel you have to go back to face-to-face teaching at some point?
I feel like I definitely need a bit of both. I do enjoy the online teaching a lot. It does give me joy. It gives me energy. I think that I do feel very good as a teacher online. I also feel like I do need to have that face-to-face interaction with people. And I feel like that's just like it's a human connection, and we all need to have that human connection, as Rhea has pointed out. Like there's a sense of needing to have that just presence. There's like the physical presence that you have with people. And I think that's crucial to having a very successful teaching and learning experience. So I think that it helps a lot in that way. It's just a very different kind of experience when you're teaching online. So, but I definitely would say I'm definitely here in the online teaching world to stay, even if it is just part-time in the future. I still want to do it. I wouldn't say I want to continue doing it like I am right now full-time, but I would say that in the future, I'm definitely going to continue to keep it on because it does bring me joy, and I've greatly enjoyed it.
I think I'm quite similar. I would love to be maybe a future hybrid teacher where I teach some classes face to face, but I also teach classes online. At the moment, at least, where I'm teaching here in Korea at a university, it doesn't look like there's any motivation to move to a hybrid model. It feels like we've gone from online teaching now back to face-to-face teaching. Forget we were ever on Zoom, or forget we ever made videos. But I do hope in the future there is more flexibility over how we can teach. Because I think there are, like Rhea said, there are a lot of benefits to online teaching. Take away the commuting time. If it's asynchronous, students can log in and catch up on classes and view content whenever they need it. They don't have to be in a bricks or mortar classroom all the time to pass the course. There's a question I always ask my students, and it's about happiness. I'll be honest, when I ask my students what is happiness, how can they become happy, and remember I teach mainly university freshmen, some older students, unfortunately they tend to always say money. Money can be an issue for teachers, but in the past, when I first became a teacher, I would Google things like how to be a successful teacher, how to be a great teacher, how to achieve great things in teaching. I never Googled how to be a happy teacher or how to achieve teacher happiness. It just wasn't something I even considered. Rhea, what would you say is a happy teacher? How can a teacher become happy? Is that a really difficult question? It's different for everybody? Or do you think there are some things in general we could say to be a happy teacher? This is what it looks like. This is how we can achieve it.
I think that's a choice that you make every day, and reminding yourself that you always have a choice. And this could be applied to anything, in a relationship, in a job, where you want to live. And you're there because you chose to be there. And then from there, what next? What do you want to do now? Is the way to look at it. And is happiness, what is happiness anyways? Like, is happiness to be trouble free, or to manage the challenges that come along? um I'm not sure about that word. I like it, but I'm a little suspicious, like,
How about for you on an individual level, Rhea? What would you say is happiness for you as a teacher? Like, what do you prioritize in your teaching? Like, if you were looking for a job or you're changing a job, what would be the reasons to do that?
well, I think we need to be able to be intrinsically motivated, just as our students do. We want to create an environment for our students that will facilitate intrinsic motivation for them to learn. We're not going to be able to reach every student in the same way, but we want to generally create a well-functioning educational environment, and that's thriving, and we can feel people growing, and we need to do that for ourselves too. So I look to am I successful in reaching the goals that I want for my students? And, you know, who can help me reflect on this, whether it be research or talking with someone or reflecting on my own teaching. And I think it's really important that I get up and I feel satisfied with what I'm doing. And am I being inclusive? Is am I bringing what I want to in the class? You know, and teaching is in the way that it can be difficult and that has this infiniteness about it. It can also be exciting because of that same aspect. Like you're never going to run out of something to learn about. Teachers tend to be lifelong learners themselves. And when you mentioned you have a passion outside of the classroom, it doesn't mean that you're doing something, you're not like cheating on your teaching. You're just getting yourself happy for your life. And I think it's really important that teachers keep themselves curious and keep themselves happy in their places. And if you need to switch the place you're in, then you can. Um, I think that in Korea, there's a sense of back home and not back home. And then at a certain point, a person starts to move that idea of where home is. And that's a really interesting process. Like, I'm totally fascinated with the whole process of what it is to be living as an expat in another country, um, and how it's very different for people from one place or another, and to kind of look at what is our contribution to this larger community. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh no, I think very interesting. For me, teacher happiness has changed over the years from depending on where I was teaching, where I am in my career. The last time I changed jobs, the two things I prioritized for my happiness as a teacher wasn't money, or I know a lot of teachers want more vacation time. That comes up in conversations quite often. For me, it was the chance to be autonomous, especially over creating my own teaching materials, creating my own exams, and just the chance to be really creative. So when I taught in the Hogwon, it was, here's the textbook, don't deviate, every single page has to be 100% filled in, don't do anything of your own stuff. Depending on the Hogwon director, they might even say don't play games, or could be the opposite, play games. So just the chance to feel like I have a blank canvas or an empty classroom, and what I'm doing in the classroom, I have a lot of my own choice over, a lot of my own creative freedom. So the last time I changed jobs, it was that goal. So I'm very happy where I am now in terms of the teaching environment, because I do design all my materials, I design my own exams, and I can tailor it based on my own philosophy over teaching. How about for you, Jared? Happiness as a teacher, what do you prioritize, or what do you think that means?
I would say I would agree with you, Wayne, that I think that autonomy is very important for me as a teacher. I feel like in order for me to be creative with my classes, I need to have the space to do activities with my students that are enriching and engaging, and use a lot of different kinds of skill sets for the students. And so I really enjoy creating my own materials, and I really enjoy also utilizing a lot of materials that there are online currently with students, certain game activities, certain ways of really helping students to be engaged in the online sphere. So that's been very helpful for me. Overall, I also believe that a happy teacher is someone who really has achieved the balance in their life, in terms of delicately carrying on different aspects of their lives, kind of a full kind of swing with the right amount of attention and energy given to each part of it. And I think a happy teacher knows when to work, when to rest, and how to achieve a sense of equilibrium that defines their career and enables them to achieve their goals and dreams. And I think that, as Rhea mentioned, intrinsic motivation is very important. I think a happy teacher has their own motivation and goals that propels them to reach their own objectives. So maybe they have a personal objective of teaching this way, using this technique, mastering this grammar topic, or some other thing that they really want to do very well. They really work at it with their whole hearts, and they're able to use that in the classroom and achieve that. And I think it really makes the everyday work really exciting for them. It enables them to desire to go to work. And I think work becomes so enjoyable that it's almost like play. And sometimes, I mean, I feel like for me, sometimes, teaching can become so exciting and enjoyable that it's like, I don't even feel like it's work anymore. And I think that's really where you feel like you really are at a point that you're very happy and that you couldn't imagine yourself doing anything else.
I like that a lot. Yeah, even last week when I was getting all my students in groups, in pairs, speaking on different topics, and they're using all their conversation skills. I felt very happy in the classroom. But when I did leave the classroom and I went for my lunch break, I did wonder, was that actually teaching? Because it felt so enjoyable. It felt, I don't want to say the word easy, but it felt like they were just all speaking, doing exactly what I wanted, and I felt like I was hands off. I'm just listening to their conversations, giving them some feedback here and there. So I think those moments where it feels like the students for me are kind of just, they don't need me anymore. It sounds strange, but it's like I'm quite happy if they're progressing so much that it feels like, hey, I don't even feel like I'm teaching. And also if time feels like it has passed really quickly. Quite often I look at my watch, okay, time to start, and then I look again, oh, time to take a 10-minute break, oh, class is over. So yeah, if time kind of disappears, I quite like that as well. Has that happened for you, Rhea, where time has just disappeared while you were teaching?
Yeah, and I usually use that for my students as a meter of, okay, how well is the conversation going? Well, if you're losing track of time, if it doesn't feel like work, that's the sweet spot that we're going for, because it is really exciting to be able to speak another language and realize you can do it, especially for students in Korea who have been working at it for so many years from a different angle and never quite had a chance to do it in a more open way, or just focused on communicative ability, which is where I tend to focus a lot of my energy. And it's like I said before, in other places, it's like opening a door, and just the excitement of going through that door, like this new world of possibilities, not only to connect with other people, but when someone learns a new language, it's like opening a new door within themselves. You have this other person that is you, that is, the French Jared or the Korean Wayne or whatnot, like it's really exciting to give them that. And when we can bring in that feeling of play, I agree, that's the ultimate level of learning. We might have to do a lot of steps to build that, but I agree with what you're saying 100%.
One final thing, yeah, this conversation today has made me very, very happy, listening to all your different input, different advice. And yeah, so anytime I finish a conversation like today or finish a class and I'm happy, I would say that's a successful class or a successful conversation. So thank you very much, Jared and Rhea, for joining me today. If you want to learn more about both our speakers today, take a look in the YouTube description and we'll link to some more interesting stuff from both our speakers. But for now, thank you very much. See you next time for the next episode of KOTESOL Conversations.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Wei.